You are standing in a place that should not exist. For 6 months of every year, the Serengeti dies, the rains stop, the grass withers to dust, the rivers shrink to cracks in baked earth. Everything that can leave, leaves. Everything that remains, suffers. And yet, when the rains return, life explodes back into existence. Not slowly, not cautiously, but in a tsunami of hooves and wings and breath. 2 million animals converge on these plains. Wildebeests stretch across the horizon in rivers of fur and dust. Zebras move in striped currents beside them. Gazelles dance at the edges like foam on a wave. This is the Great Migration, the largest movement of land mammals on Earth. But here is the paradox. This miracle depends entirely on death. The wildebeest that drown in the Mara River feed the crocodiles that wait below. The weak calves that fall behind nourish the lions, the hyenas, the jackals, the bodies that never make it become soil. The soil becomes grass. The grass feeds the survivors. The survivors create the next generation. Death and life are not opposites here. They are partners in an ancient choreography that has played out for millennia. A circle with no beginning, no end, only continuation. The Serengeti should collapse under this violence. It should exhaust itself, devour itself, empty itself. But it never does. Instead, every year the herds return, stronger, more numerous, proof that nature's mathematics work in ways we are only beginning to understand. Before we begin, take a breath. If you find peace here, let the trail stay open. Subscribe to Rest with the Wild, and give this video a like so other travelers can find their way here. Tonight, you walk into the Serengeti at dawn. Around you, the ancient plains stretch endlessly, grass becoming flesh, flesh becoming earth, earth becoming grass again. Granite kopjes rise like islands from an ocean of gold. Acacia trees stand witness, having watched this procession for centuries. Dust clouds mark the passage of 1 million lives moving across the horizon. You will witness 3 stories as you walk. A wildebeest mother, navigating her first migration with a newborn at her side. A young lioness, learning what it means to feed her pride. And a grey-crowned crane who watches it all unfold, building her nest in the shadow of the great wheel of life. You will see how the oldest drama on Earth, predator and prey, hunger and abundance, death and renewal, creates not chaos, but balance. Tonight, you will discover why the Serengeti not only survives, but thrives on impossibility. Let the journey begin. The plains stretch before you in every direction. 30,000 square kilometers of East Africa, where the horizon curves away, unbroken. You stand in the Serengeti. The name comes from the Maasai word Serengeti, the place where the land runs on forever, and it does. Grasslands roll like a golden sea around you, interrupted only by kopjes, islands of ancient granite that rise abruptly from the plains, worn smooth by wind and time. These rocky outcrops shelter lions in their shade, leopards on their heights, hyrax and lizards basking in the sun. Scattered across the landscape stand umbrella acacias, their flat crowns silhouetted against endless sky. Some are hundreds of years old, their trunks scarred by elephant tusks, their branches pruned by giraffes. They stand as witnesses, silent, patient, enduring. To the north, the land rises and becomes the Maasai Mara in Kenya, where grass grows lusher and greener. There flows the Mara River, a serpent of brown water cutting through green banks. It is beautiful, it is deadly. Every year, thousands cross it. Not all survive. To the south and east, the land climbs toward the Ngorongoro Highlands, where volcanic soil enriches the plains and creates the most fertile grazing in Africa. This is where life begins each year, where 500,000 wildebeest calves are born within a 3-week window, a synchronized explosion of new life that overwhelms predators by sheer numbers. The Serengeti is not one ecosystem, it is many, nested within each other like breath within lungs. Short grass plains in the south become long grass savannas in the west. Woodlands thicken into riverine forests along the Grumeti and Mara rivers. Kopjes create micro-habitats where moisture collects and different rules apply. Every gradient of elevation, rainfall and soil creates a different world, and something has evolved to live in each one. But it is the Great Migration that defines this place. This is not a journey with a beginning or an end. It is a loop, a circle traced by hooves across the land, year after year, following the rains, following the grass, following an ancient map written into instinct and bone. The herds move clockwise through the landscape. Roughly 2 million animals, 1.5 million wildebeest, 500,000 Thompson's gazelles, 200,000 zebras. They are accompanied by thousands of predators, lions, cheetahs, leopards, hyenas, wild dogs, who follow the column of life like shadows follow light. The wildebeest are the backbone of this migration. Coexistence taurinus, blue wildebeest, strange shaggy creatures that look assembled from spare parts. The horns of a buffalo, the mane of a horse, the beard of a goat, the shoulders of a cow. They move in rivers, in clouds, in oceans. When they run, the earth trembles beneath your feet. When they call, the plains echo with grunts and snorts that sound almost prehistoric. The zebras move with them. Equus quagga, plains zebras with their bold black and white stripes, each pattern as unique as a fingerprint. They are the trailblazers, often moving ahead of the wildebeest, clearing the tallest grass and making pathways through the landscape. The Thompson's gazelles, Eudorcus thomsoni, drift at the edges like nervous energy made flesh. Small, delicate, impossibly fast. They can outrun a cheetah for short bursts, their white tails flicking constantly, a semaphore of alertness that never sleeps. And the predators, always the predators. Lions, Panthera leo, golden ghosts in the grass, working in coordinated prides, ambush hunters who rely on patience and teamwork. Cheetahs, Acinonyx jubatus, built for speed, solitary sprinters who hunt in daylight when lions rest. Hyenas, Krakuta, misunderstood scavengers who are also skilled hunters, working in clans, their eerie calls echoing across the plains at night. Above it all, vultures circle. On the ground, jackals dart between larger predators, stealing scraps. In the rivers, crocodiles wait with the patience of stone. This landscape is the stage. The animals are the players. And the performance has been running without intermission for thousands of years. Tonight, as you walk these plains, you will follow 3 lives caught in this great wheel. A wildebeest mother, her calf born only weeks ago, moving with the herd for the first time toward the northern plains. She has never crossed the Mara River. She does not know what waits there, but instinct pulls her forward like gravity. A young lioness near the riverbanks, part of a small pride struggling through the dry season. She is learning to hunt, learning to kill, learning what it means when the pride depends on her claws and her courage. And a grey-crowned crane, Balearica regulorum, a bird of elegant beauty with a crown of golden feathers, nesting in the wetlands near the migration route. She watches the herds pass, year after year, a living witness to the cycle that never breaks. Their stories begin now. The plains are waking around you. The herds are stirring. The circle turns once more. A wildebeest mother stands at the edge of the herd, her calf pressed close against her flank. Born 3 weeks ago on the southern plains during the calving season, the young one is still learning what it means to be part of 2 million. His legs are stronger now than they were at birth, when he stood on wobbly limbs within minutes, driven by instinct to rise or be left behind. She watches him constantly, her dark eyes scanning for threats that could come from any direction. Lions, hyenas, cheetahs, wild dogs. The air itself seems full of teeth. This is her first migration as a mother. Last year she was young, unburdened, moving with the flow of the herd without responsibility. This year everything has changed. The calf cannot keep pace with the adults when the herd stampedes. He tires easily. He is curious, wandering toward edges where danger waits. She has learned to position herself between him and the periphery, nudging him back toward the center where safety lives in numbers. Ahead lies the Mara River. She does not know what that means yet, but the herd is moving north, and she will follow. She must follow. A young lioness lies in the shade of a kopje, panting softly in the midday heat. 2 years old, still learning the precise mathematics of the hunt. Her pride is small. Her mother, an older aunt, 2 sisters, and 3 cubs that are not her own, but will be her responsibility to feed. The dry season has been hard. The herds moved through weeks ago, and now game is scarce. Warthogs, the occasional gazelle, never enough. The cubs are thin. Her mother's ribs show. Yesterday, she made her first solo stalk on a zebra at the waterhole. She moved downwind, belly low, muscles coiled. She got close enough to smell the dust on its hide, close enough to hear it breathing. But she rushed the final burst. The zebra saw her a heartbeat too soon and bolted. She crashed through empty space where flesh should have been, tumbling into the dirt as the herd vanished in thunder. Her mother did not scold her. There was only silence and hunger and the knowledge that she must do better. Soon, the migration will return, moving south as the rains begin again. When it does, she will be ready. She has to be. The grey-crowned crane. She stands motionless at the edge of the wetland, her reflection perfect in the still water. The golden crown of feathers atop her head catches the late afternoon light. She has nested here for 7 years, watching the great wheel turn with each season. She knows the rhythm now, the herds arriving from the south, pausing to drink and graze, then moving north toward the river. Months later, they return, thinner, fewer, but still alive, still moving. Her nest is hidden in the reeds, 3 pale eggs waiting for her warmth. Her mate stands watch nearby, his call a trumpet that echoes across the marsh. She is not prey, not predator. She is observer, witness. The wildebeest pass, and she remains. The lions hunt, and she remains. The crocodiles wait, and she remains. She feeds on insects, seeds, small frogs. She does not need the drama of tooth and hoof to survive, but she watches it unfold with the patience of something that understands. All of this has happened before. All of this will happen again. The circle does not break. These 3 lives, mother, hunter, witness, move through the same landscape, under the same sky, breathing the same air. Their paths will cross. Their fates are woven together by invisible threads that connect predator to prey, observer to observed, life to death to life again. To understand why the Serengeti exists, you must travel back in time. Not decades or centuries, but millions of years, to when this land was something entirely different. The story begins not with grass, but with fire. 25 million years ago, the Great Rift Valley began tearing Africa apart. Tectonic forces deep beneath the Earth's crust pulled the continent in opposite directions, creating a massive fracture that would reshape everything. As the rift opened, magma surged upward, building volcanoes that towered over the landscape. The Ngorongoro Highlands rose from this violence, a chain of volcanic mountains that would eventually include Kilimanjaro to the east and Mount Kenya to the north. These volcanoes did more than change the skyline. They changed the climate. The highlands created a rain shadow, blocking moisture from the Indian Ocean and turning the land to their west into something drier, more open. Forests that once covered this region began to retreat. In their place, something new emerged: grassland. The Serengeti was born not from stability, but from catastrophe. Volcanic ash enriched the soil, creating some of the most fertile earth in Africa. When the rains came, grass grew in extraordinary abundance, thick, nutritious, and endless. But grass alone does not make a migration. For that, you need animals capable of eating it, digesting it, and moving vast distances to follow it. The ancestors of modern wildebeest evolved during this transformation. Early bovids, relatives of today's antelope and buffalo, began adapting to the new grasslands around 5 million years ago. They developed specialized teeth for grinding tough vegetation. Their digestive systems became 4-chambered fermentation factories, capable of breaking down cellulose that most animals cannot process. Their hooves grew harder, wider, built for endless walking across open ground, rather than delicate stepping through forest undergrowth. Natural selection worked in real time. Animals that could eat grass efficiently survived. Animals that could walk long distances to find fresh grass survived. Animals that could give birth quickly, calves standing within minutes, survived because predators were everywhere, always watching. The modern wildebeest is the result of millions of years of refinement, shaped by this landscape as surely as the landscape was shaped by volcanic fire. Their bodies are endurance machines. They can walk 25 kilometers in a day without strain. They can go days without water if they must, extracting moisture from the grass itself. Their social structure, massive herds moving as one, is a defense mechanism refined over millennia. A single wildebeest is vulnerable. 2 million wildebeest become something predators cannot fully comprehend, much less conquer. The predators evolved alongside them, locked in an ancient arms race. Lions spread across Africa around 124,000 years ago, descendants of cave lions that once roamed Europe and Asia. They became ambush hunters, relying on strength and cooperation rather than speed. A single lion can take down prey twice its size, but a pride working together can bring down a buffalo. They learned patience, waiting in tall grass, watching herds for hours, identifying the weak, the young, the distracted. Their tawny coats became camouflage designed specifically for this landscape of gold and shadow. Cheetahs took a different path. They sacrificed power for speed, becoming the fastest land animal on Earth. Their bodies are aerodynamic marvels, lightweight frames, oversized lungs, semi-retractable claws for traction. They can accelerate from 0 to 100 kilometers per hour in 3 seconds, but they can only maintain that speed for 30 seconds before overheating. This makes them specialists, forced to hunt during the day when lions rest, targeting the young and the small. They are fragile in a way lions are not, injured in fights, exhausted after hunts, frequently losing kills to larger predators. They survive by being brilliant at one thing, and one thing only. Hyenas are perhaps the most misunderstood. For decades, they were considered mere scavengers, feeding on the leftovers of more noble hunters. But research has revealed the truth. Spotted hyenas are among Africa's most successful predators. They hunt in coordinated packs, capable of chasing prey for kilometers until exhaustion claims it. Their jaws generate crushing force exceeding that of lions. allowing them to consume every part of a carcass: bones, hooves, horns. They are intelligent, social, adaptable. Their matriarchal clans operate with complex hierarchies that rival primate societies. They are survivors in the purest sense, thriving in a landscape that offers no guarantees. And the zebras, Equus quagga, trace their lineage back millions of years to the Pliocene epoch, when early horses roamed North America before migrating to Africa via land bridges that no longer exist. They are grazers, like wildebeest, but with different preferences. Zebras eat the tallest, toughest grass first, clearing the way for wildebeest, who prefer shorter, more tender shoots. This creates a symbiotic relationship within the migration. Zebras as pioneers, wildebeest as followers, each making the journey easier for the other. Their stripes remain one of nature's enduring mysteries. Theories abound: camouflage through motion blur, temperature regulation, protection from biting flies. Likely, the truth is all of these, layered atop one another through evolutionary time. The Thompson's gazelles evolved to be what the others are not: small, fast, expendable. They reproduce quickly, their populations rebounding from losses with remarkable speed. They are the base of the food chain, feeding cheetahs, jackals, wild dogs, and eagles. Without them, the ecosystem would collapse. Their survival strategy is not armor or strength, but overwhelming numbers and escape velocity. They are prey, and they have made an art form of it. This ecosystem took shape over millions of years, each species adapting to the others, creating a balance so intricate that removing any single piece would cause the entire structure to wobble. The grass feeds the grazers feed the predators cull the weak and sick, keeping herds healthy and preventing overgrazing. The scavengers consume the remains, returning nutrients to the soil. The soil feeds the grass. The circle completes itself over and over, sustaining abundance in a place that should, by all logic, be barren. The first light touches the horizon, turning the sky from black to deep purple to burning orange. Around you, the herd begins to stir. Hundreds of thousands of dark shapes rise from the ground where they spent the night, a sea of bodies stretching in every direction. The wildebeest mother lifts her head, ears swiveling, listening. Her calf stands beside her, shaking dew from his coat. Something has changed in the air. The wind carries a scent she recognizes from deep in her genetic memory. Rain. Distant, still days away, but unmistakable. The herd smells it too. Around her, animals begin to move, not in panic, not in haste, but with purpose. The migration is beginning again. She nudges her calf and he follows, falling into step beside her. They join the flow, becoming part of the river of life that moves north. The ancient instinct that brought her ancestors across these plains a million years before now pulls her forward. She does not question it. She cannot question it. She simply walks, and the circle turns. The fossil record tells stories written in stone. In Olduvai Gorge, just south of the Serengeti, paleontologists have uncovered bones dating back nearly 2 million years. Evidence of animals that look remarkably similar to those walking these plains today. Ancient wildebeest, prehistoric zebras, lions that would be recognizable if they walked into a modern pride. The Great Migration is not a recent phenomenon. It is ancient beyond human memory, older than our species, older than our genus. Homo habilis walked these plains 2 million years ago and watched the herds pass. Homo erectus hunted at their edges. Early Homo sapiens followed the migration, relying on it for survival just as predators do today. The Serengeti has endured ice ages, droughts lasting decades, volcanic eruptions, and climatic shifts that reshaped continents. Through it all, the migration continued. When the world cooled and grasslands expanded, the herds grew larger. When warming periods brought forests back, the herds adapted, shifting their routes, changing their timing. This flexibility, this ability to respond to change without breaking, is what has allowed the ecosystem to persist for so long. It is not rigid, it is not fragile, it is resilient in ways we are only beginning to understand. The geological clock ticks slowly, but it never stops. The Rift Valley continues to spread, pulling apart at a rate of 6 millimeters per year. In 10 million years, East Africa will split entirely, creating a new ocean. The Serengeti as we know it will cease to exist. But until that distant future arrives, the grass will grow, the rains will come, the herds will move, and the circle will turn, as it has turned for longer than we have walked upright. For most of human history, the Serengeti was known only to those who lived within it. The Maasai people who moved with their cattle across these plains, coexisting with the wildlife in a delicate balance that predated written records. To the outside world, East Africa remained a mystery, hidden behind disease, distance, and geography that resisted exploration. Malaria, sleeping sickness, and other tropical illnesses claimed the lives of early travelers before they could penetrate far inland. The interior was called the white man's grave, a place where outsiders rarely returned. The first European to document the Serengeti was Oskar Baumann, an Austrian explorer who crossed the region in 1892. His journals describe endless plains teeming with game, herds so vast they took hours to pass, lions so numerous they could be heard roaring from every direction at night. He was awestruck and terrified in equal measure, documenting a wilderness that seemed to exist outside of time, untouched by the Industrial Revolution transforming Europe. But Baumann's expedition was brief, his observations limited. He named what he saw, but did not understand it. That deeper comprehension would take decades more. The true scientific study of the Serengeti began in the mid-20th century, driven by a growing awareness that this ecosystem was unique and endangered. Colonial-era hunting had decimated wildlife populations across Africa. Elephants were slaughtered for ivory, rhinos for horns, lions for sport. The Serengeti was not immune. By the 1920s, there were serious concerns that the wildebeest migration might collapse entirely. Rinderpest, a viral disease introduced to Africa through imported cattle, had ravaged wild ungulate populations. Wildebeest numbers plummeted from perhaps 2 million to fewer than 200,000. The migration shrank, routes changed, and for a time it seemed the great wheel might stop turning. The creation of Serengeti National Park in 1951 marked a turning point. It was not merely a protective designation. It was an acknowledgement that this place was worth saving, that it represented something irreplaceable. But protection alone was not enough. Scientists needed to understand what they were protecting. How did the migration work? What drove it? Could it survive human encroachment, climate change, disease? These questions had no easy answers, and finding them would require years of patient observation. One man became synonymous with Serengeti research, Bernhard Gezemek, a German zoologist who arrived in the 1950s with his son Michael. Together they conducted the first systematic aerial survey of the migration, flying a small plane over the plains and counting animals from above. It was dangerous work. In 1959, Michael Gezemek's plane collided with a vulture and crashed, killing him instantly. He was buried on the rim of Ngorongoro crater, overlooking the plains he had dedicated his life to studying. His father continued the work, publishing research that revealed the scale of the migration for the first time. Over 1 million animals moving in a loop determined not by borders or human convenience, but by ancient patterns written into the land itself. Grzimek's work demonstrated something crucial. The migration could not be confined to arbitrary boundaries. Animals did not recognize the borders of national parks. They moved where the grass grew, where the rain fell, where instinct guided them. This realization forced a radical rethinking of conservation. Protecting the Serengeti meant protecting not just a park, but an entire ecosystem spanning thousands of square kilometers across 2 countries. It meant understanding that wildlife and human communities were interconnected, that successful conservation required cooperation, not conflict. Modern research has taken this understanding further. Using technology Grimek could never have imagined. Satellite collars now track individual wildebeest, zebras, and lions across the plains, sending location data every few hours. Scientists can map entire migration routes in real time, watching as herds respond to rainfall patterns, predator presence, and human activity. GPS data has revealed that the migration is not random. It follows predictable pathways shaped by water availability, grass quality, and terrain features. But within that predictability is flexibility. If a route becomes blocked or dangerous, the herds adapt, finding new paths that maintain the essential loop. Research on predator-prey dynamics has yielded surprising insights. For years, scientists assumed that predators controlled prey populations, that lions, hyenas, and cheetahs kept wildebeest numbers in check through constant hunting. But data showed the opposite. Predation has remarkably little impact on overall wildebeest populations. The migration is so massive, so overwhelming, that even thousands of predators cannot meaningfully reduce it. Instead, it is the grass that controls the herds. In years of good rainfall, when grass is abundant, wildebeest populations explode. In drought years, starvation, not predation, brings numbers down. The predators are opportunists, feeding on a resource so plentiful that their impact barely registers. This revelation upended traditional ecological thinking. The Serengeti is not controlled from the top down by apex predators, but from the bottom up by primary productivity, the amount of grass the land can produce. Everything flows from that foundation. More grass means more grazers. More grazers means more predators. Less grass means the entire system contracts. But it does not collapse. It adapts. It endures. She stands at the wetland's edge, one leg tucked beneath her body, perfectly still except for the occasional slow turn of her head. Around her, the landscape shimmers in the heat. The herds are moving again. Not the chaotic stampede of panic, but the steady, purposeful flow of migration. Dust rises in clouds that hang in the air like fog. The sound is constant now, a low rumble that vibrates through the ground. Thousands of hooves, thousands of voices, thousands of lives moving as one. She watches without urgency. This is not new to her. She has seen this 7 times before, every year since she reached maturity and claimed this territory. The herds come, the herds go, she remains. Her eggs are warm beneath her, hidden in the reeds where predators rarely venture. Her mate is nearby, his eyes sharp, his trumpet call ready if danger approaches. But there is no danger now. Only the endless passage of the migration, a river of flesh and dust flowing past her small island of stillness. She is part of this ecosystem, but separate from its urgency. She does not eat the grass. She does not flee from lions. She witnesses, and in her witnessing, she completes the circle in a way the others cannot. She is the memory that watches itself repeat. Nutrient cycling research has revealed another layer of complexity. When wildebeest cross the Mara River, many drown, thousands every year, depending on conditions. For decades, this was seen as tragic waste, a failure of the migration's design. But scientists studying the river ecosystem discovered something remarkable. Those drowned bodies are not waste, they are food. Crocodiles feed immediately, but they cannot consume everything. The remaining carcasses sink to the riverbed, where they decompose slowly, releasing nutrients into the water: nitrogen, phosphorus, carbon. These nutrients feed algae, which feed insects, which feed fish, which feed birds and otters and everything else connected to the river. The Mara River's ecosystem depends on this annual influx of death. In years when fewer wildebeest drown, fish populations decline. The entire aquatic food web contracts. The wildebeest are not just passing through, they are feeding the river itself, subsidizing an ecosystem that would be far poorer without them. Death in the water creates life in the water. The circle extends even into places the herds never reach. Scientists have also studied the impact of fire on the Serengeti ecosystem. For years, fire was seen as destructive, something to be prevented and suppressed. But traditional knowledge from the Maasai told a different story. They had been using controlled burns for generations, clearing old grass to encourage fresh growth, creating mosaics of burned and unburned patches that attracted different species. Modern research confirmed what indigenous people already knew. Fire is not the enemy of grassland ecosystems. It is part of their natural cycle. Lightning strikes ignite wildfires during the dry season, clearing dead vegetation and returning nutrients to the soil. When the rains come, new grass erupts from the ash-enriched earth, greener and more nutritious than what came before. Without fire, the Serengeti would gradually transform into woodland as trees and shrubs encroach on open plains. Fire keeps the grasslands open, maintaining the habitat that makes the migration possible. Conservation managers now use controlled burns strategically, mimicking natural fire regimes and working with local communities to maintain the landscape in a state that benefits both wildlife and people. She moves through the tall grass with practiced silence, her body low, muscles fluid. Ahead, at the edge of the herd, a young wildebeest has wandered too far from its mother. It grazes alone, unaware. The lioness has been watching it for 20 minutes, closing distance one careful step at a time. Her heart pounds, but she controls her breathing. Slow, patient. Wait for the moment. But she is still learning. A gust of wind shifts direction, carrying her scent toward the herd. The young wildebeest lifts its head, nostrils flaring. For a split second, predator and prey lock eyes. Then the wildebeest bolts, bleating alarm. The entire herd erupts into motion, hundreds of animals thundering away in a cloud of dust and panic. The lioness bursts from cover, sprinting at full speed, but she is too far. The wildebeest reaches the safety of the herd, swallowed by the mass of bodies, indistinguishable from 10,000 others. She slows to a stop, panting, frustrated. Another failed hunt. She is fast, strong, capable, but not yet experienced enough to read the wind, to judge distance perfectly, to know when to commit and when to wait. Her pride is depending on her, and she is failing them. But she does not give up. She turns, trots back toward the kopje where her family waits. There will be another chance. There is always another chance. The herds are endless. She only needs to succeed once. One of the most significant recent discoveries involves climate change and its impact on migration patterns. Long-term data collected over 50 years shows that rainfall patterns in the Serengeti are becoming more variable. Wet seasons are wetter, dry seasons harsher. The timing of rains, once predictable enough that herds could navigate by instinct alone, is now shifting. Some years the rains arrive early, other years they come late, or not at all. The wildebeest are adapting in real time, adjusting their routes and timing based on conditions. But there are limits to adaptation. If rainfall becomes too unpredictable, if droughts become too severe, the migration could falter. Researchers are also studying the genetic diversity of Serengeti wildlife. looking for clues about resilience and vulnerability. Wildebeest, with their massive population, have high genetic diversity, a buffer against disease and environmental shocks. But predators like cheetahs show worrying signs of genetic bottlenecks, the result of past population crashes. Lower genetic diversity makes populations more vulnerable to disease, less able to adapt to change. Conservation efforts now focus not just on protecting habitat, but on maintaining genetic health through population monitoring and, when necessary, interventions to prevent inbreeding. The Serengeti has become one of the most studied ecosystems on Earth, a living laboratory where scientists from around the world come to understand how nature works when given space to function on its own terms. Every year brings new discoveries, new questions, new appreciation for the complexity hidden beneath what appears simple. The migration is not just animals walking in circles. It is mathematics written in hoofprints, chemistry flowing through grass and flesh, physics governing the movement of millions. It is life teaching us how life endures. Long before scientists arrived with their notebooks and GPS collars, people lived here. The Maasai have walked these plains for centuries, their history woven into the landscape as deeply as the migration routes themselves. They are pastoralists, herders who move with their cattle across the same grasslands where wildebeest graze, drinking from the same rivers, sheltering under the same acacia trees. To call them inhabitants suggests separation. They are part of the ecosystem, their lives synchronized with the rhythms that govern everything else. The Maasai relationship with wildlife is complex, built on respect rather than dominance. Lions are both threat and symbol, dangerous to livestock, but also revered as embodiments of courage and strength. Traditionally, young Maasai warriors proved their bravery by hunting lions with nothing but spears, a practice that created tension but also understanding. To kill a lion required intimate knowledge of its behavior, its territory, its vulnerabilities. The hunters learned to think like the hunted. This created a relationship based not on distance, but on proximity, a recognition that humans and predators shared the same space and must negotiate terms of coexistence. Cattle and wildebeest compete for grass, yet the Maasai understood what modern ecologists are only now confirming. Diversity creates resilience. Cattle can eat certain grasses wildebeest ignore. Wildebeest can digest plants toxic to cattle. Together, they utilize the landscape more efficiently than either could alone. During droughts, when grass becomes scarce, conflicts arise. Cattle dying, herders desperate, wildlife seen as competition rather than cohabitants. But in good years, there is enough for everyone, and the Maasai know this. Their traditional land management practices, rotational grazing, controlled burns, seasonal movements, mirror the migration itself. They learned from the wildebeest how to survive in a place where nothing stays the same for long. The arrival of colonial powers disrupted this balance. British administrators in the early 20th century imposed borders where none had existed, creating protected areas that excluded people who had lived there for generations. The Maasai were evicted from parts of the Serengeti to make room for wildlife conservation and tourism. The message was clear. Animals mattered more than people. This created resentment that persists today, a wound that has never fully healed. Conservation became associated with displacement, with loss of livelihood, with outsiders making decisions about land they did not understand. The Ngorongoro Conservation Area, created in 1959, attempted a different approach, a multiple-use zone where Maasai could continue grazing their cattle alongside wildlife. It was a compromise, imperfect but necessary. The challenge was finding balance, enough protection to preserve the ecosystem, enough flexibility to allow human livelihoods. It worked, to a degree. Cattle and wildlife still share the Ngorongoro highlands. But the population has grown. More people means more cattle, more competition, more pressure on resources. The balance is fragile, constantly renegotiated between conservation authorities and local communities who feel their voices are not always heard. Human-wildlife conflict is not abstract. It is personal, immediate, and sometimes deadly. Lions kill cattle. Herders kill lions in retaliation. Elephants raid crops. Farmers poison waterholes. Conservationists see tragedy. Local communities see survival. When a family's entire wealth is tied up in livestock, a single lion attack can mean ruin. When a field of maize, 6 months of labor, is destroyed by elephants in one night, the response is not philosophical reflection. It is anger, grief, and the desperate need to protect what little you have. Modern conservation efforts are slowly recognizing that people must benefit from wildlife, not just tolerate it. Programs like the Serengeti Lion Project work directly with Maasai communities, providing compensation for livestock losses, building predator-proof enclosures, training warriors as wildlife monitors instead of lion hunters. The logic is simple. If lions have value, if they bring tourism revenue, if they create jobs, if they become sources of pride rather than sources of loss, then people will protect them. Conservation cannot succeed if it only serves animals. It must serve people too. Community-based conservation initiatives are spreading across the Serengeti ecosystem. Villages on the borders of protected areas receive revenue from tourism. Maasai guides lead safaris, sharing traditional knowledge that scientists are still discovering. Women's cooperatives sell crafts to visitors, generating income that reduces dependence on livestock. Schools and clinics are built with funds tied to conservation success. Slowly, the narrative is changing. Wildlife is not just something to be endured, but something that can improve lives. If managed fairly, if benefits are shared equitably. Yet challenges remain. Population growth continues. People need land, water, food. Wildlife corridors, the routes animals use to move between protected areas, are increasingly threatened by agriculture, roads, and fences. If these corridors are lost, the migration becomes fragmented, trapped in isolated pockets that cannot sustain it. The Serengeti could become an island, surrounded by human development, slowly suffocating under pressure from all sides. Preventing this requires political will, international cooperation, and most importantly, the participation of local communities who live on the front lines of conservation every day. One of the most successful initiatives has been the creation of wildlife management areas. Community-controlled lands where villagers make decisions about land use and receive direct benefits from conservation. These areas serve as buffers around national parks, allowing wildlife to move while also providing sustainable income for people. It is not perfect. There are disputes, mismanagement, corruption. But it represents a fundamental shift. Conservation as partnership, not imposition. The people who know this land best are finally being invited to help manage it. Cultural traditions are also evolving. The Maasai practice of lion hunting, once a rite of passage, is becoming rare as younger generations find other ways to prove themselves. Some become wildlife rangers. Some work in tourism. Some pursue education and leave the pastoral life entirely. This creates tension within communities. Elders worried about lost traditions, youth seeking opportunities beyond cattle herding. The Maasai are not frozen in time. They are adapting, just like the wildebeest adapt, just like the ecosystem adapts. The question is whether that adaptation can happen fast enough to keep pace with the changes sweeping across East Africa. Tourism brings both opportunity and complication. The Serengeti is one of the world's most famous wildlife destinations, drawing hundreds of thousands of visitors each year. The money they spend supports conservation, creates jobs, justifies protection. But tourism also brings impact. Vehicles disturbing hunts, lodges consuming water, aircraft noise stressing animals. Finding the balance between allowing people to experience this wonder and protecting it from being loved to death is an ongoing challenge. Too many visitors degrade the very thing they came to see. Too few, and the economic justification for conservation weakens. Technology offers new tools for coexistence. Mobile phone networks now cover much of the Serengeti region, allowing herders to report livestock losses immediately, enabling rapid response teams to track problem animals before conflict escalates. GPS collars on lions send alerts when they approach villages, giving people time to secure their livestock. Drones monitor for poaching, covering vast areas that would be impossible to patrol on foot. These innovations do not replace human relationships. They enhance them, making coexistence more practical and less costly for everyone involved. The herd slows at the riverbank. Thousands of animals crowd together, pressed flank to flank, the smell of dust and sweat and fear thick in the air. Ahead, the Mara River flows wide and brown, its surface deceptively calm. She has never seen this water before, but something in her knows it is dangerous. The herd shifts nervously, voices rising in bleats and grunts, a sound like thunder building. For minutes that feel like hours, nothing happens. The front line of wildebeest approach the water's edge, then retreat. Approach again. Retreat again. No one wants to be first. Then, somewhere in the crowd, a decision is made. Or perhaps panic takes over. One animal plunges forward, and suddenly the dam breaks. Hundreds of wildebeest pour down the steep bank, splashing into the water in a cascade of bodies and spray. The mother hesitates for only a moment, then follows, her calf tight beside her. The current is stronger than it looked. She swims hard, legs churning, keeping her head above water. Her calf struggles beside her, his young muscles fighting the pull of the river. Around them, the water is chaos. Animals swimming in every direction, some making progress, others swept downstream. She can smell crocodiles, ancient and patient beneath the surface. She does not look for them. She looks only forward at the far bank where grass grows green and safety waits. Her calf is tiring. She feels him faltering, his breaths coming in gasps. She moves closer, letting him press against her flank, using her body to shield him from the worst of the current. Hooves find purchase on the river bottom. Shallow water. The bank is close. She lunges forward, scrambling up mud and rock, her calf stumbling after her. They collapse on the far side, water streaming from their coats, chests heaving. Behind them, the crossing continues. Thousands more still plunging in, the river churning with life and desperation. But they made it. They survived. The circle continues. 4 seconds transition with river sounds fading, grass and wind returning. The future of the Serengeti depends on whether humans and wildlife can share space without one destroying the other. It is not a question with easy answers. People need land, animals need land, and there is only so much to go around. But perhaps the Maasai offer a model. Thousands of years of coexistence proving that it is possible, if not always easy, if not without cost. The migration has survived because people allowed it to survive, because they made space for it, because they found ways to live alongside it, even when it complicated their lives. Conservation is often framed as humans versus nature, preservation versus development, wildlife versus people. But the Serengeti tells a different story. It suggests that with enough creativity, compromise, and respect, there might be room for everyone. Not perfect harmony, nature does not work that way, but functional coexistence, messy, complicated, constantly renegotiated, but enduring. Just like the migration itself, the 20th century nearly destroyed the Serengeti. What took millions of years to evolve, what survived ice ages and volcanic eruptions and climatic upheavals, almost vanished in a few decades of human ambition. The story of how it survived is as much about political will and changing values as it is about ecology. It is a reminder that nature's resilience has limits, and that preservation is a choice humans must make deliberately, often against powerful opposing forces. The colonial era brought industrial-scale hunting to East Africa. Big game hunting was sport for wealthy Europeans and Americans. Trophy lions, record elephants, rhinoceros heads mounted on walls thousands of miles away. Professional hunters led expeditions into the Serengeti, killing animals by the hundreds to satisfy clients seeking adventure and status. Theodore Roosevelt's 1909 safari killed over 500 animals, including 17 lions, 11 elephants, and 20 rhinoceros. This was not subsistence hunting. This was entertainment. The wildlife that had seemed infinite began to look finite. By the 1920s, the impact was undeniable. Elephant populations had crashed. Black rhinos, once common across the Serengeti, became rare. Even lions, apex predators with no natural enemies, were declining under hunting pressure. Colonial administrators began to worry, not from moral concern, but from pragmatic realization. If the wildlife disappeared, so would the tourist revenue. The British government established partial protections, creating game reserves, where hunting was restricted but not banned. These were half measures, insufficient to reverse the damage, but enough to slow the bleeding. The rinderpest epidemic of the 1890s had already devastated ungulate populations across Africa. Introduced through cattle imported from India, the virus spread like wildfire, killing an estimated 90% of wildebeest, buffalo, and other hoofed animals. The Serengeti's grasslands became eerily empty, the migration reduced to a shadow of its former self. Predators starved. Scavengers vanished. The entire ecosystem teetered on the edge of collapse. It would take decades for populations to recover, and during that time the land itself changed. Without grazers to keep it clear, woody vegetation spread, transforming open plains into scrubland. Recovery began slowly, naturally, as surviving populations rebuilt. But human threats persisted. Poaching for bushmeat, ivory and hides continued throughout the colonial period and into the independence era. Local communities, displaced from their traditional lands and excluded from conservation benefits, saw wildlife as resources to be extracted rather than treasures to be protected. Lions were poisoned in retaliation for livestock kills. Elephants were shot for their ivory, which commanded high prices in international markets. Rhinos were hunted nearly to extinction for horns valued in traditional medicine. The Serengeti was being picked apart piece by piece. The turning point came in 1951 with the establishment of Serengeti National Park. It was a radical act, taking 14,750 square kilometers and declaring it off-limits to hunting, settlement, and most human activity. The decision was controversial, particularly among the Maasai who lived within the proposed boundaries. They were told to leave, to move their cattle elsewhere, to sacrifice their homes for the sake of animals. Many refused. Negotiations dragged on for years, eventually leading to the creation of the Ngorongoro Conservation Area as a compromise zone where people and wildlife could coexist. The park's creation did not immediately solve all problems. Poaching continued, fueled by poverty and lack of alternative livelihoods. Enforcement was weak, vast areas patrolled by too few rangers with inadequate resources. But the park established a principle. The Serengeti was worth protecting, not just for Tanzania, but for the world. It declared that some places should remain wild, that not every landscape must be converted to human use. This was a revolutionary thinking in an era when development and progress were measured by how much wilderness could be tamed. International support grew throughout the 1960s and 1970s. Organizations like the Frankfurt Zoological Society, inspired by Bernhard Grzimek's work, provided funding for ranger patrols, anti-poaching efforts, and scientific research. The Serengeti became a symbol, proof that conservation could work if properly supported. Tourism increased, bringing revenue that justified continued protection. Slowly, the ecosystem stabilized. Wildlife populations began to recover. The migration, reduced to a fraction of its historical size, started to swell again as wildebeest numbers climbed from 250,000 in the 1960s to over 1.5 million by the 1990s. This recovery was not inevitable. It required sustained commitment from the Tanzanian government, often in the face of pressure to open protected lands for agriculture, mining, and development. It required international funding when domestic resources were scarce. It required painful compromises with communities who felt excluded from lands their ancestors had inhabited. And it required a fundamental shift in how people valued wildlife, not as resources to be consumed, but as heritage to be preserved. The rise of ecotourism transformed conservation economics. In the 1980s and 1990s, safari tourism became Tanzania's second largest source of foreign revenue after agriculture. The Serengeti was the crown jewel, attracting visitors from around the world willing to pay premium prices for the chance to witness the migration. This created a powerful incentive. Alive, wildlife was worth more than dead. A single lion could generate hundreds of thousands of dollars in tourism revenue over its lifetime. An elephant was worth more for the photographs it inspired than for the ivory in its tusks. But tourism brought its own complications. Lodges and camps sprang up inside and around the park, consuming water, generating waste, disturbing wildlife. Vehicle traffic increased, sometimes with dozens of safari trucks surrounding a single lion kill, engines idling, tourists jostling for photographs. The very success of conservation created new pressures. Park managers struggled to balance access with protection, to allow people to experience the Serengeti without destroying what made it special. Regulations evolved in response. Limits were placed on the number of vehicles allowed at animal sightings. Off-road driving was banned in most areas to protect grasslands. Lodge construction was restricted to designated zones outside the core migration routes. These rules were not always popular. Tourism operators complained about lost opportunities. Visitors grumbled about restrictions. But they were necessary. The Serengeti could not be loved to death. It had to be loved wisely. Dusk settles across the plains, turning the sky orange and purple, long shadows stretching from every acacia tree. The herd has stopped for the night, settling into nervous rest, thousands of dark shapes against golden grass. The lioness watches from a termite mound, her pride hidden in the tall grass behind her. They have been stalking this section of the herd for over an hour, moving with patience, learned through hunger and failure. Her mother leads the hunt, positioning sisters on opposite sides, creating a corridor with no escape. The lioness holds her ground, muscles coiled, waiting for the signal. A young wildebeest, not a calf, but not yet fully grown, grazes at the edge of the group, unaware. The wind is perfect, blowing toward the lions, carrying away their scent. Everything aligns. Her mother charges first, exploding from the grass in a burst of speed and power. The herd panics, scattering in all directions. The young wildebeest bolts toward the lioness exactly as planned. She waits one more heartbeat, then launches herself forward. This time, there is no hesitation, no rush. She times it perfectly. Her claws find flesh. Her jaws close on the wildebeest's throat. They crash to the ground together, rolling in dust and grass. But her grip never loosens. She holds on as the animal struggles, holds on until the movements slow, then stop. The kill is clean, quick, as merciful as death can be in the wild. Her pride emerges from the grass, her mother first, then her sisters, then the cubs who have been waiting, hungry for days. There is no celebration, no ceremony, just relief. They feed together, tearing meat from bone, the cubs mewling with eagerness, finally able to eat their fill. Around them, vultures gather in trees, waiting their turn. Hyenas call in the distance, drawn by the scent of blood. The lioness eats until she cannot eat anymore, her belly full for the first time in a week. This is the circle. Death feeds life. The wildebeest's body will nourish the pride, sustain the cubs, allow them to grow strong. What the lions leave behind will feed scavengers. What the scavengers miss will return to the soil, enriching the grass that will feed the next generation of wildebeest. Nothing is wasted, nothing is meaningless. Every death serves the continuation of life. The lioness does not understand this intellectually, but she lives it. She is part of the equation, a variable in nature's mathematics that always balances, always continues. The historical struggle to save the Serengeti offers lessons that extend far beyond East Africa. It demonstrates that conservation is never finished, never secure. Each generation must choose to continue protecting what previous generations saved. Political will can evaporate. Economic pressures can override ecological concerns. Public support can wane if people feel excluded from the benefits. Protecting wilderness is not a one-time decision, but an ongoing commitment that must be renewed constantly. The Serengeti also shows that conservation and development do not have to be mutually exclusive. Communities around the park are not poorer because wildlife is protected. Many are wealthier, benefiting from tourism, employment, and revenue-sharing programs. The key is ensuring that benefits flow to the people who bear the costs of living alongside wildlife. When conservation improves lives, it becomes sustainable. When it impoverishes people, it becomes impossible to maintain. Yet the Serengeti's survival remains fragile. Proposals for roads cutting through the park continue to resurface, driven by pressure to connect regions for economic development. Agricultural expansion pushes closer to park boundaries every year. Climate change threatens rainfall patterns that drive the migration. Human population growth around the ecosystem creates ever-increasing demand for land and water. The battles that seemed won decades ago must be fought again, constantly, by people who understand what will be lost if vigilance fails. International conservation funding, which played such a crucial role in the park's recovery, is not guaranteed. Economic crises, shifting political priorities, and donor fatigue can reduce support suddenly and dramatically. Tanzania must increasingly rely on domestic resources to protect its heritage, but the government faces competing demands: schools, hospitals, infrastructure, all urgent, all underfunded. Asking a developing nation to prioritize wildlife over human needs requires acknowledging the imbalance. Wealthy nations consumed their wilderness. Now they ask poorer nations to preserve theirs. That requires compensation, not just admiration. The Serengeti story is ultimately about values. Do we value wilderness for its own sake, or only for what it provides us? Do we have an obligation to preserve ecosystems for future generations, or do present needs always take precedence? These are not merely philosophical questions. They have real consequences. The Serengeti exists today because enough people across generations and cultures answered those questions in favor of preservation. Its continued existence depends on whether future generations give the same answers. Today, the Serengeti faces challenges that previous generations never imagined. Climate change is reshaping rainfall patterns that have remained relatively stable for thousands of years. The migration, which evolved to follow predictable wet and dry seasons, now confronts uncertainty. Some years the rains fail entirely, leaving grasslands barren and waterholes dry. Other years, storms arrive with unprecedented intensity, flooding rivers and drowning animals by the thousands. The herds adapt as best they can, but adaptation takes generations. Change happening within decades leaves little time to evolve new strategies. Scientists monitoring the ecosystem have documented shifts in migration timing. Wildebeest that once arrived at the Mara River in July now sometimes arrive in June or August, responding to rainfall patterns that no longer follow the old schedule. This creates mismatches, arriving at grazing grounds before grass has grown sufficiently, or after it has already dried out. The consequences ripple through the food web. Predators that time their breeding to coincide with the arrival of vulnerable calves find their cubs going hungry when the herds arrive late. Plants adapted to specific grazing pressure face either overgrazing or underutilization as herds compress or expand their range. Human infrastructure threatens the migration's ancient roots. The most significant proposal in recent years has been for a commercial highway cutting across the northern Serengeti, connecting Lake Victoria to coastal ports. Proponents argue it would boost economic development, reducing transport costs and opening markets. Conservationists counter that it would bisect the migration route, creating a barrier that could fragment populations and disrupt the circular movement that defines the ecosystem. After years of international pressure, the Tanzanian government suspended the project, but proposals resurface periodically as development pressures intensify. Fencing poses another threat. As agricultural communities expand around the park, farmers erect fences to protect crops from wildlife. Each fence is small, localized, reasonable from an individual perspective. But collectively, they create barriers that narrow wildlife corridors, forcing animals into smaller and smaller spaces. A migration route that once stretched hundreds of kilometers wide is now constricted to narrow passages where human tolerance still exists. If these corridors close, the migration becomes fragmented, populations isolated in protected areas, unable to access the full range of habitats they need to survive year-round. Poaching, though reduced from its peak in the 1970s and 1980s, remains a persistent problem. The demand for ivory drives elephant poaching. Rhino horn, valued in some Asian markets for traditional medicine, has made black rhinos virtually extinct in the Serengeti. Bushmeat poaching, killing wildebeest, zebras, and gazelles for food, continues in areas where enforcement is weak and poverty is high. Rangers patrol constantly, confiscating snares, arresting poachers, but it is an endless game of cat and mouse across thousands of square kilometers of wilderness. Technology is changing conservation enforcement. Drones now survey areas impossible to patrol on foot. Acoustic sensors detect gunshots, triangulating locations, and dispatching rapid response teams. Artificial intelligence analyzes satellite imagery to identify illegal settlements or livestock encroachment in protected zones. These tools are powerful, but they are also expensive, requiring sustained funding and technical expertise. Moreover, technology cannot address the root causes of poaching: poverty, lack of opportunity, and the perception that wildlife benefits outsiders more than local communities. Disease represents an emerging threat, amplified by climate change and human activity. Canine distemper, spread by domestic dogs, has killed lions in the past. Anthrax outbreaks periodically sweep through herbivore populations. Avian influenza threatens vultures and other scavengers. As temperatures rise and rainfall patterns shift, disease vectors like ticks and mosquitoes expand their ranges, carrying pathogens into populations that have no immunity. Monitoring animal health across such a vast ecosystem is nearly impossible, but outbreaks can devastate populations before anyone notices. Weeks have passed since the river crossing. The northern plains are greener than anything she has seen, grass knee-high and lush from recent rains. Her calf has grown visibly stronger, his legs longer, his movements more confident. He no longer stumbles or tires easily. When the herd moves, he keeps pace without effort. When danger threatens, he knows to run toward the center, not away from it. He is learning what it means to be wildebeest. The constant vigilance, the communal safety, the rhythm of grazing and moving and grazing again. Around them, new life emerges from the earth. Flowers bloom in patches of color, yellow, purple, white, that will vanish within weeks as the dry season approaches again. Birds nest in the grass, their songs filling the dawn air. Insects hum in clouds, feeding on the abundance, themselves becoming food for birds, lizards, frogs. This is the season of plenty, the reason the migration exists. For a few brief months, the land offers more than survival. It offers abundance. The wildebeest eat their fill, storing energy for the lean months ahead, fattening their bodies for the long walk that will inevitably come again. The mother watches her calf with something that might be satisfaction, though she has no words for it. He will survive. She knows this now with the certainty that comes from watching him grow strong. When the circle turns again, when the herd begins its journey back south, he will make it. He will return to the place where he was born, and perhaps one day, if he survives long enough, he will make this journey with calves of his own. The circle continues. Always, it continues. Innovative conservation approaches are emerging to address modern challenges. Wildlife corridors are being formally protected through partnerships between governments, NGOs, and local communities. Land trusts purchase or lease critical areas, ensuring they remain open to migration. Community conservancies, where villages control land use decisions but commit to wildlife protection, are expanding, creating buffer zones that connect protected areas. These initiatives recognize that conservation cannot succeed if confined to park boundaries. The migration needs landscape-level protection, spanning multiple jurisdictions and land ownership types. Education programs target the next generation, teaching children about wildlife value and conservation principles. Schools near the park receive support, books, supplies, teacher training, in exchange for incorporating environmental education into curricula. The goal is to create a generation that sees wildlife as heritage rather than hindrance, as opportunity rather than obstacle. It is a long-term investment, the fruits of which may not be apparent for decades, but it represents a fundamental shift in strategy. Conservation must change hearts and minds, not just enforce boundaries. Scientific research continues to reveal new insights. Camera traps scattered across the ecosystem document species presence and behavior without human interference. Long-term studies track individual animals across decades, revealing life histories and population dynamics. Genetic research explores relatedness, diversity, and adaptation potential. All this knowledge feeds into management decisions, making conservation more targeted, more effective, more responsive to changing conditions. The Serengeti has become a living laboratory, and the data collected here informs wildlife management globally. Her eggs have hatched. 3 chicks, downy and awkward, nestle in the reeds beneath her. They are impossibly fragile, all legs and beak and hunger. Her mate brings food, insects plucked from the water's edge, small frogs, seeds. She feeds them with delicate precision, placing each morsel directly into their gaping mouths. They cheep constantly, demanding more, always more. She will spend weeks feeding them, protecting them, teaching them. Most will not survive to adulthood. Predators, disease, accidents. The odds are against them, but some will survive. Perhaps all 3, if fortune favors them. Around her, the wetland is alive with sound and motion. The herds have begun their journey south again, following the rains back toward the Serengeti's southern plains. The circle turns, as it always turns. She has watched this 7 times now, and each time it fills her with something that might be wonder if birds feel such things. The herds leave, the herds return, the seasons change, the circle never breaks. Her chicks will learn this rhythm, will understand that everything is connected. The grass, the grazers, the predators, the rain, the dry, the life, the death. All of it part of one great turning wheel that has no beginning and no end. She cannot explain this to them, but she will show them day by day through her presence and her patience that this is how the world works. This is how life continues. The future of the Serengeti is not guaranteed, but neither is it hopeless. Every challenge has inspired responses, new technologies, new partnerships, new ways of thinking about conservation. The ecosystem has shown remarkable resilience, recovering from near collapse multiple times. The migration persists not because it is invulnerable, but because people keep choosing to protect it, generation after generation, despite competing pressures and temptations to prioritize short-term gains over long-term preservation. Young Tanzanian conservationists are taking leadership roles, bringing fresh perspectives and local knowledge that international experts sometimes lack. Women are increasingly involved in wildlife management, both as rangers and community leaders, shifting dynamics in traditionally male-dominated fields. Indigenous ecological knowledge is being incorporated into scientific research, bridging traditional and modern approaches. These changes suggest that conservation is evolving, becoming more inclusive, more locally rooted, more sustainable in the deepest sense of that word. The Serengeti endures because it must, because the alternative, a world without wild places, without migrations, without the ancient rhythms that shaped our species, is too impoverished to accept. The plains will continue to roll into the distance. The herds will continue to move. And somewhere, always, there will be people watching, protecting, ensuring that the circle keeps turning for generations yet unborn. The Serengeti Mara ecosystem represents something larger than itself. It is one of the last places on Earth where megafauna, large animals, still exist in numbers that resemble the Pleistocene, the age before humans reshaped every landscape. Watching the migration is like looking through a window into the past, seeing what much of the planet once looked like when wildlife moved freely across continents. North America had its own great migrations: bison on the prairies, caribou in the Arctic. Most are gone or reduced to fragments of their former scale. The Serengeti is a remnant, a survivor, a reminder of what we have lost elsewhere and what we still have the chance to preserve here. Ecologists call the Serengeti a complete ecosystem, one where all the pieces that evolve together still exist and function. There are grazers, browsers, predators, scavengers, decomposers. There are seasonal movements driven by rainfall and grass growth. There are nutrient cycles connecting soil to plant to animal and back again. Remove any major component and the system would degrade, becoming simpler, less resilient, less able to absorb shocks. This completeness is rare. Most ecosystems have lost key species, apex predators hunted to extinction, mega herbivores eliminated, ecological relationships broken. The Serengeti still has its full complement of players, still performs the full symphony rather than fragments of melody. This makes it invaluable for science. Researchers studying the Serengeti are not just observing one ecosystem. They are learning principles that apply globally. How do predator-prey dynamics maintain balance? How do migrations create connectivity across landscapes? How does climate variability affect population stability? What makes some species resilient and others vulnerable? The answers emerging from Serengeti research inform conservation efforts worldwide, from the steppes of Mongolia to the savannas of South America. Protecting this ecosystem is not just about preserving one place. It is about maintaining a living reference library, a control group against which we can measure what we have damaged elsewhere. The economic value of the Serengeti extends far beyond Tanzania's borders. Tourism generates hundreds of millions of dollars annually, supporting livelihoods across East Africa. But the ecosystem also provides services that cannot be easily quantified in currency. It regulates local climate through transpiration from vegetation. It stores carbon in grasslands and soils, helping mitigate climate change. It protects watershed function, ensuring clean water flows to communities downstream. It maintains genetic diversity that may prove crucial as species adapt to changing conditions. These ecosystem services benefit millions of people, most of whom will never visit the Serengeti, but depend on it nonetheless. Community-based conservation has emerged as the most promising approach for long-term sustainability. The Icona Wildlife Management Area, established in 2006 on the western edge of the park, demonstrates this model in action. Local villages control land use decisions, receive revenue from tourism and hunting concessions, and manage wildlife populations in partnership with government authorities. The result has been reduced poaching, increased wildlife numbers outside protected areas, and improved livelihoods for participating communities. It is not perfect. There are disputes over revenue distribution, concerns about transparency, debates over hunting ethics, but it represents a fundamental shift from top-down enforcement to collaborative management. Women's empowerment has become a key component of conservation strategy. In many traditional communities around the Serengeti, women have little voice in land use decisions despite doing most of the agricultural work. Programs targeting women with education, microloans, and leadership training have shown that empowering women often leads to more sustainable resource use. Women tend to invest more in children's education, family nutrition, and long-term planning. When women gain economic independence through conservation-related enterprises, crafts, guiding, hospitality, they become powerful advocates for wildlife protection, shifting household and community priorities in ways that men alone could not achieve. Technology continues to revolutionize conservation practice. Satellite imagery combined with machine learning can now detect changes in vegetation, water availability, and animal distribution across the entire ecosystem. Rangers equipped with smartphones and GPS can report observations in real time, creating dynamic maps of wildlife presence, poaching incidents, and human-wildlife conflict. Genetic analysis from dung samples allows scientists to estimate population sizes and track individual animals without ever seeing them. Collar technology has advanced to the point where devices can monitor animal health metrics, heart rate, body temperature, activity levels, providing early warning of disease or distress. The concept of transboundary conservation has gained traction, recognizing that ecosystems do not respect political borders. The Serengeti Mara ecosystem spans Tanzania and Kenya, requiring cooperation between governments that sometimes have competing interests. The Mara Serengeti Transboundary Conservation Area facilitates coordination on anti-poaching efforts, fire management, disease control, and tourism regulation. Similar transboundary initiatives are emerging worldwide, acknowledging that nature's geography differs from human geography, and conservation must adapt accordingly. Climate adaptation strategies are being developed proactively rather than reactively. Scientists are modeling how different climate scenarios might affect rainfall patterns, grass productivity, and migration routes. Conservation planners are identifying areas that might become critical refuges as conditions change. High-altitude zones that stay cooler, perennial water sources that remain even during severe droughts, corridors that allow animals to shift ranges as climate zones move. The goal is to ensure the ecosystem retains flexibility, that options remain open as the future unfolds in ways we cannot fully predict. The sun sinks toward the horizon, painting the sky in layers of orange, pink, and purple. The plains glow gold in the failing light, shadows stretching long and soft. The wind calms to a whisper. The heat of day gives way to evening's gentle cool. Across the Serengeti, life settles into the rhythms that bridge day and night. The wildebeest mother and her calf graze peacefully near the herd's center. The calf is nearly her size now, strong enough to make the journey south when the time comes. She no longer watches him with constant vigilance. He has learned what he needs to know. The danger has not disappeared. It never disappears, but he knows how to navigate it. The herd moves slowly through the grass, feeding, resting, existing in the moment without past or future. The circle has carried them safely through another cycle. It will carry them through the next. The young lioness lies with her pride on the kopje, her belly full, her body relaxed. The cubs tumble over each other in play, mock fighting, preparing for adulthood. Her mother watches them with the patience of experience, knowing that play becomes skill, becomes survival. The lioness has proven herself. She can hunt, she can feed the pride. She has earned her place in the circle, not through birthright alone, but through capability learned through failure and hunger and persistence. Tomorrow she will hunt again. But tonight, there is rest. There is peace. The grey-crowned crane stands in the shallows of the wetland, her 3 chicks hidden safely in the reeds behind her. They are stronger now, feathering out, beginning to look like birds rather than bundles of fluff. Her mate calls from a nearby tree, the trumpet sound that marks their territory, that announces their presence to the world. She answers, and together their voices echo across the water. They are witness to this land, observers of the great wheel turning. They have seen the herds arrive and depart. They have seen predators hunt and prey escape. They have seen life and death dance together in the eternal choreography. And they remain constant, enduring, part of the circle, but apart from its urgency. Around them, the Serengeti breathes. Grass rustles in the evening breeze. Birds settle into trees for the night. Predators begin to stir, preparing for the nocturnal hunt. Prey animals cluster together, seeking safety in numbers. The kopjes glow red in the last light, then fade to shadow. Stars emerge, one by one, then thousands at once, the Milky Way stretching overhead like a river of light. The same stars that shone on the first wildebeest, the first lion, the first human who walked these plains and wondered at the abundance. Nothing here is permanent. Everything changes, seasons, populations, rainfall, temperature. Yet something remains constant, something deeper than the details. The circle turns. Life feeds on death, feeds on life. The grass grows, the herds move, the predators hunt, the scavengers clean, the soil receives, the grass grows again. It has happened this way for longer than memory, longer than history, longer than the species who now watches and tries to understand. And if we allow it, if we choose to protect rather than consume, it will continue happening long after we are gone. 4 seconds transition with full night sounds, insects, distant hyenas, peace. The Serengeti does not need us. We need it. We need places where nature still operates by its own rules, where the equations balance themselves, where life demonstrates that resilience is possible even in harsh conditions. We need reminders that we are not separate from the natural world, that we depend on the same systems, the same cycles, the same fundamental processes that govern every living thing. We need humility in the face of something older and wiser than our civilizations. The migration teaches patience. It teaches that abundance and scarcity are partners, not enemies. It teaches that death is not the opposite of life, but part of its continuation. It teaches that individuals matter less than the continuation of the whole, yet the whole depends entirely on individuals. Each wildebeest calf, each lion hunt, each blade of grass. It teaches that complexity creates stability, that diversity breeds resilience, that connection across vast distances makes survival possible. If the Serengeti survives the 21st century, it will be because we chose to value it more than the roads we could build through it, more than the farms we could plant on it, more than the resources we could extract from it. It will survive because we learned to see ourselves not as conquerors of nature, but as participants in it, subject to the same rules, dependent on the same cycles. The circle will continue if we allow it to. The choice increasingly is ours. The night deepens over the Serengeti. Somewhere in the darkness, a lion roars, a sound that carries for kilometers, announcing territory, warning rivals, reminding everything that listens that the apex predator is awake and hungry. The wildebeest herd shifts nervously but does not panic. They have heard this sound every night of their lives. It is part of the landscape, like wind and thunder and the smell of rain coming across distant hills. You have walked these plains from dawn to dusk, witnessing the great wheel turn. You have seen 3 lives intersect and diverge, each following their own path, each part of something larger than themselves. The wildebeest mother guided her calf through his first migration, teaching him through example what it means to survive in a world that offers no guarantees. The lioness learned to hunt, to feed her pride, to take her place in the ancient transaction between predator and prey. The crane watched it all unfold, bearing witness, embodying the patience and perspective that comes from understanding that everything has happened before and will happen again. Their stories are not unique. Across the Serengeti tonight, thousands of mothers guard their young. Hundreds of predators stalk through tall grass. Countless witnesses, birds, insects, small mammals, observe the drama from their own perspectives, playing their own roles in the great interconnected web. Each story is individual, yet all are part of the same larger story, the story of life persisting, adapting, continuing against odds that should overwhelm it, but never quite do. Nothing in the Serengeti truly ends, it only transforms. The wildebeest calf that did not survive the river crossing fed crocodiles, which fed scavengers, which returned nutrients to the soil, which fed the grass, which will feed next year's calves. The lion's kill nourished not just the pride, but also hyenas, vultures, jackals, beetles, bacteria, an entire community of life that depends on death to continue. Even the grass that stands green tonight will die, will dry, will burn in lightning-sparked fires. and from those ashes will emerge grass again, beginning the cycle anew. The migration is not a journey from one place to another. It is a circle, a loop with no beginning and no end, only continuation. Following the rains, following the grass, following instincts coded into genes over millions of years. The wildebeest do not know why they move, only that they must. They do not understand the concept of migration, yet they execute it perfectly, generation after generation, guided by forces older than consciousness. They are not following a plan. They are the plan, written in flesh and hoof, executed through living and dying, refined through time spans that make human history look like a single breath. The Serengeti should not exist. By all logic, it should have collapsed under its own violence centuries ago. The predation should have overwhelmed the prey. The droughts should have emptied the plains. The diseases should have decimated populations beyond recovery. Human pressure should have fragmented it into isolated patches too small to sustain the migration. But it did not collapse. It adapted. It endured. It continues. Perhaps this is the deepest lesson the Serengeti offers. Resilience is not the absence of hardship, but the capacity to absorb it and continue. The ecosystem has faced droughts, floods, fires, diseases, and relentless hunting pressure. It has bent but not broken. It has contracted and expanded, faltered and recovered. Each challenge revealed new depths of resilience, new mechanisms of adaptation that scientists are still discovering. The Serengeti survives not because conditions are perfect, but because the web of life is woven so tightly that it can lose individual threads and still hold together. As you stand here in the darkness, feeling the wind that has blown across these plains for millions of years, hearing sounds that have echoed here since before humans walked upright, you are not separate from what you witness. You are part of it. The same elements that form the grass, the wildebeest, the lions, form you. The same water that fills the Mara River flows in your veins. The same carbon that fuels the migration fuels your breath. The circle includes everything. Nothing stands outside it. Tomorrow, the sun will rise over the Serengeti. The grass will glow gold. The herds will move. The predators will hunt. The scavengers will clean. The rain will come, or it will not come. The circle will turn, as it has turned for longer than we can comprehend, as it will continue to turn if we allow it. The future is not certain, but it is possible. The Serengeti exists because we have chosen to protect it. It will continue to exist if we keep making that choice, generation after generation, even when it is difficult, even when other priorities seem more urgent. Rest now. Let the wind carry away your restlessness. Let the stars remind you that some things are larger than human concerns, older than human civilizations, more enduring than any single life. The plains breathe beneath you. The earth turns. The circle never breaks. Close your eyes and know that somewhere, always, the migration continues. Life feeds on life. Death feeds new life. The grass grows. The herds move. The balance holds. Nothing truly ends. It only begins again.